Hello, hello, good evening, good evening. It's me, Madam Algorithm, ready to continue on in this book from Russia with love. So, right now, last that we saw of our friend James Bond, he is with, what's his name? Karim? And Karim is showing him his I don't know, like he cut out some hole in their wall with the Russians, and now they're able to listen in and, well, no, they can't listen in because they're too far away, but they could watch them. So it's gonna be interesting. They're trying to see if they can catch a glimpse of Tatiana, the girl that has fallen madly in love uh with Bond. So we'll see how all that turns out. Oh, did I like sync what is happening? Like I fell or something. There we go. That looks all right. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's doing something. I'll just make myself bigger. Yes. All right, we're going to be reading chapter 17. We're going to read chapter 17 through 21 tonight. So here we go. Chapter 17. Killing Time. It was 7 o'clock on the same evening, and James Bond was back in his hotel. He had had a hot bath and a cold shower. He thought that he had at last scored the zoo smell out of his skin. He was sitting, naked except for his shorts, at one end of the windows of his room, sipping a vodka and tonic and looking out into the heart of the great tragic sunset over the Golden Horn. But his eyes didn't see the torn cloth of gold and blood that hung behind the the minaret stage beneath which he had caught his first glimpse of Tatiana Romanova. He was thinking of the tall, beautiful girl with the dancer's long gait who had walked through the drab door with a piece of paper in her hand. He had stood beside her chief and handed him the paper. All the men had looked up at her. She had blushed and looked down. What had that expression on the men's faces meant? It was more than just the way some men look at a beautiful girl. They had shown curiosity. That was reasonable. They wanted to know what was in the signal, why they were being disturbed. But what else? There had been slyness and contempt, the way people stare at prostitutes. It had been an odd, enigmatic scene. This was part of a highly disciplined paramilitary organization. These were serving officers, each of whom would be wary of the others. And this girl was just one of the staff, with a corporal's rank, who was now going through a normal routine. Why had they all unguardedly looked at her with this inquisitive contempt? Almost as if she was a spy who had been caught and was going to be executed. Did they suspect her? Had she given herself away? But that seemed less likely as the scene played itself out. The resident director read the signal, and the other men's eyes turned away from the girl and on to him. He said something, presumably repeating the text of the signal, and the men looked glumly back at him as if the matter did not interest them. Then the resident director looked up at the girl, and the other eyes followed his. He said something with a friendly, inquiring expression. The girl shook her head and answered briefly. The other men now only looked interested. The director said one word with a question mark at the end. The girl blushed deeply and nodded, holding his eyes obediently. The other men smiled encouragement. Slyly, perhaps, but with approval. No suspicion there. No condemnation. The scene ended with a few sentences from the director, to which the girl seemed to say the equivalent of "Yes, sir," and turned and walked out of the room. When she had gone, the director said something with an expression of irony on his face, and the men laughed heartily, and the sly expression was back on their faces, as if what he had said had been obscene. Then they went back to their work. Ooh. Bond is trying to piece everything together now, I see. Ever since, on their way back down the tunnel, and later in Kareem's office while they discussed what Bond had seen, Bond had racked his brains for a solution to this maddening bit of dumb crambo, and now, looking without focus at the dying sun, he was still mystified. Bond finished his drink and lit another cigarette. He put the problem away and turned his mind to the girl. Tatiana Romanova. A Romanov. Well, she certainly looked like a Russian princess, or the traditional idea of one. The tall, fine-boned body that moved so gracefully and stood so well. The thick sweep of hair down to the shoulders, and the quiet authority of the profile. The wonderful Gobrovsk face with its curiously shy serenity. The contrast between the level innocence of the big, deep blue eyes and the passionate promise of a wide mouth. And the way she had blushed, and the way the long lashes had come down over the lowered eyes. Had that been the prudery of a virgin? Bond thought not. There was the confidence of having been loved in the proud breast and the insolently lidded behind. The assertion of a body that knows what it can be for. Oh man. Bond, stop that. On what Bond had seen, could he believe that she was the sort of girl to fall in love with a photograph and a file? How could one tell? Such a girl would have a deeply romantic nature. There were dreams in the eyes and in the mouth. At that age, 24, the Soviet machine would not yet have ground the sentiment out of her. The Romanov blood might well have given her a yearning for men other than the type of modern Russian officer she would meet. Stern, cold, mechanical, basically heretical, and, because of their party education, infernally dull. It could be true. There was nothing to disprove her story and her looks. Bond wanted it to be true. The telephone rang. It was Kareem.
Nothing new? No. Then... Oh, wait. This is Kareem talking, my bad. Then I will pick you up at 8. I'll be ready.
Bond laid down the receiver and slowly started to put on his clothes. Kareem had been firm about the evening. Bond had wanted to stay in his hotel room and wait for the first contact to be made. A note, a telephone call, whatever it might be. But Kareem said no. The girl had been adamant that she would choose her own time and place. It would be wrong for Bond to seem a slave to her convenience.
That is bad psychology, my friend, Kareem had insisted. No girl likes a man to run when she whistles. She would despise you if you had made yourself too available. From your face and your dossier, she would expect you to behave with indifference, even with intolerance. She would want that. She wishes to court you, to buy a kiss. Kareem had winked. "From that cruel mouth. It is with an image she has fallen in love. Behave like that image. Act the part."
Bond had shrugged his shoulders.
All right, Darko. Oh, sorry, I gave him a, a Russian accent. I gotta warm up my British accent now. All right, Darko. I dare say you're right. What do you suggest? Live the life you would normally. Go home now and have a bath and a drink. The local vodka is all right if you drown it with tonic water. If nothing happens, I will pick you up at 8. We will have dinner at the place of a gypsy friend of mine, a man called Vavra. He is head of a tribe. I must anyway see him tonight. He is one of my best courses. He is finding out who tried to blow up my office. Some of his girls will dance for you. I will not suggest that they should entertain you more intimately. You must keep your sword sharp. There is a saying, once a king, always a king, but once a knight is enough. Oh my god. I can't believe that.
Bond was smiling at the memory of Kareem's dictum when the telephone rang again. He picked up the receiver. It was only the car. As he went down the few stairs and out to Kareem in the waiting rolls, Bond admitted to himself that he was disappointed. They were climbing up the far hill through the poorer quarters above the Golden Horn when the chauffeur half turned his head and said something in a non-committal voice. Kareem answered with a monosyllable.
He says a lembretta is on our tail, a faceless one. It is of no importance. When I wish, I can make a secret of my movements. Often they have trailed this car for miles when there was only a dummy in the back. A conspicuous car has its uses. They know this gypsy is a friend of mine, but I think they do not understand why. It will do no harm for them to know that we are having a night of relaxation on a Saturday night with a friend from England. Anything else would be unusual."
Bond looked back through the rear window and watched the crowded streets. From behind a stopped tram a motor scooter showed up for a minute and then was hidden by a taxi. Bond turned away. He reflected briefly on the way the Russians ran their centers, with all the money and equipment in the world, while the Secret Service put against them a handful of adventurous underpaid men, like this one, with his second-hand rolls and his children to help him. Yet Kareem had the run of Turkey. Perhaps, after all, the right man was better than the right machine. At 8:30 they stopped halfway up a long hill on the outskirts of Istanbul at a dingy I was going to say dingy at a dingy looking open air cafe with a few empty tables on the pavement. Behind it were the tops of trees over a high stone wall. They got out and the car drove off. They waited for the Lambretta, but its wasp-like buzz had stopped, and at once it was on its way back down the hill. All they saw of the driver was a glimpse of a short, squat man wearing goggles. Kareem led the way through the tables and into the cafe. It seemed empty, but a man rose up quickly from behind the till. He kept one hand below the counter. When he saw who it was, he gave Kareem a nervous white smile. Something clanged to the floor. He stepped from behind the counter and led them out through the back and across a stretch of gravel to a door in the high wall and, after knocking once, unlocked it and waved them through. There was an orchard with plank tables dotted about under the trees. In the center was a circle of terraza dancing floor. Round it were strung fairy lights, now dead, on poles planted on the ground. On the far side, at a long table, about 20 people of all ages had been sitting, eating, but they had put down their knives and now looked towards the door. Some children had been playing in the grass behind the table. They also were now quiet and watching. The 3/4 moon showed everything up brightly, and made pools of membraned shadow under the trees. Kareem and Bond walked forward. The man at the head of the table said something to the others. He got up and came to meet them. The rest returned to their dinner, and the children to their games. The man greeted Kareem with reserve. He stood for a few moments making a long explanation to which Kareem listened attentively, occasionally asking a question. The gypsy was an imposing theatrical figure in Macedonian dress, white shirt with full sleeves, baggy trousers, and laced soft leather top boots. His hair was a tangle of black snakes. A large, downward drooping black moustache almost hid the full red lips. The eyes were fierce and cruel on either side of a syphilitic nose. The moon glinted on the sharp line of the jaw and the high cheek bones. His right hand, which had a gold ring on the thumb, rested on the hilt of a short curved dagger in a leather scabbard tipped with filigree silver. The gypsy finished talking. Kareem said a few words, forcefully and apparently complimentary, about Bond, at the same time stretching his hand out in Bond's direction as if he was a compere in a night club commending a new turn. The gypsy stepped up to Bond and scrutinized him. He bowed abruptly. Bond followed suit. The gypsy said a few words through a sardonic smile. Kareem laughed and turned to Bond. "He says if you are ever out of work you should come to him. He will give you a job, taming his women and killing for him. That is a great compliment to a gaijō, a foreigner. You should say something in reply." Oh man. I guess Bond is a regular ladies' man, huh?
Tell him that I can't imagine he needs any help in these matters. Matters.
There, gotta give him a British accent. Matters. Kareem translated. The gypsy politely bared his teeth. He said something and walked back to the table, clapping his hands sharply. 2 women got up and came towards him. He spoke to them curtly, and they went back to the table and picked up a large earthenware dish and disappeared among the trees. Kareem took Bond's arm and led him to one side.
"We have come on a bad night," he said. "The restaurant is closed. There are family troubles here which have to be solved drastically and in private, but I'm an old friend and we are invited to share their supper. It will be disgusting, but I have sent for Raki. Then we may watch, but on condition that we do not interfere. I hope you understand, my friend."
Kareem gave Bond's arm an additional pressure.
"Whatever you see, you must not move or comment. A court has just been held and justice is to be done. Their kind of justice. It is an affair of love and jealousy. 2 girls of the tribe are in love with one of his sons. There is a lot of death in the air. They both threaten to kill the other to get him. If he chooses one, the unsuccessful one has sworn to kill him and the girl. It is an impasse. There is much argument in the tribe, so the son has been sent up into the hills, and the two girls are to fight it out here tonight, to the death. The son has agreed to take the winner. The women are locked up in separate caravans. It will not be for the squeamish, but it will be a remarkable affair. It is a great privilege that we may be present. You understand. We are gallos. You will forget your sense of the proprieties. You will not interfere. They will kill you, and possibly me if you do it. Darko, said Bond. I have a French friend, a man called Mathis, who is head of the Dixième. He once said to me, J'aime les sensations fortes. I am like him. I shall not disgrace you. Men fighting women is one thing. Women fighting women is another. But what about the bomb? The bomb that blew up in your office. What did he say about that? It was the leader of the Faceless Ones. He put it there himself. They came down the Golden Horn in a boat, and he climbed up a ladder and affixed it to the wall. It was bad luck he didn't get me. The operation was well thought out. The man is a gangster, a Bulgarian refugee called Krylunsky. I shall have to have a reckoning with him. God knows why they suddenly want to kill me, but I cannot allow such annoyances. I may decide to take action later tonight. I know where he lives, in case Vavra knew the answer. I told my chauffeur to come with the necessary equipment. A fiercely attractive young girl in a thick, old-fashioned black frock with strings of gold coins round her neck and about 10 thin gold bracelets on each wrist came over from the table and swept a low, jingling curtsy in front of Kareem. She said something, and Kareem replied. "We are bidding to the table," said Kareem. "I hope you are good at eating with your fingers. I see they are all wearing their smartest clothes tonight. That girl would be worth marrying. She has a lot of gold on her. It is her dowry." They walked over to the table. Two places had been cleared on either side of the head gypsy. Kareem gave what sounded like a polite greeting to the table. There was a curt nod of acknowledgment. They sat down. In front of each of them was a large plate of some sort of ragout smelling strongly of garlic, a bottle of raki, a pitcher of water, and a cheap tumbler. More bottles of raki, untouched, were on the table. When Kareem reached for his and poured himself half a tumbler full, everyone followed suit. Kareem added some water and raised his glass. Bond did the same. Kareem made a short and vehement speech, and all raised their glasses and drank. The atmosphere became easy. An old woman next to Bond passed him a long loaf of bread and said something. Bond smiled and said, "Thank you." He broke off a piece and handed the loaf to Kareem, who was picking among his ragout with thumb and forefinger. Kareem took the loaf with one hand, and at the same time with the other put a large piece of meat in his mouth and began to eat. Bond was about to do the same when Kareem said sharply and quietly, "With the right hand, James. The left hand is used for only one purpose among these people." Bond halted his left hand in midair and moved it on to grasp the nearest raki bottle. He poured himself another half tumblerful and started to eat with his right hand. The ragout was delicious, but steaming hot. Bond winced each time he dipped his fingers into it.
Everyone watched them eat, and from time to time the old woman dipped her fingers into Bond's stew and chose a piece for him. Ew. No. That's gross. When they had scoured their plates, a silver bowl of water in which rose leaves floated, and a clean linen cloth were put between Bond and Kareem. Bond washed his fingers and his greasy chin, and turned to his host and dutifully made a short speech of thanks, which Kareem translated. The table murmured in appreciation. The head gypsy bowed towards Bond and said, according to Kareem, that he hated all Gaijos, except Bond, whom he was proud to call his friend. Then he clapped his hands sharply, and everybody got up from the table and began pulling the benches away and arranging them round the dance floor. Ooh, I think it's about that time. Kareem came round the table to Bond. They walked off together.
How do you feel? They've gone to get the two girls.
Bond nodded. He was enjoying the evening. The scene was beautiful and thrilling. The white moon blazing down on the ring of figures now settling on the benches, the glint of gold or jewelry as somebody shifted his position, the glaring pool of terrazzo, and all around the quiet sentinel trees standing guard in their black skirts of shadow. Kareem led Bond to a bench where the chief gypsy sat alone. They took their places on his right. A black cat with green eyes walked slowly across the terrazzo and joined a group of children who were sitting quietly as if someone was about to come onto the dance floor and teach them a lesson. It sat down and began licking its chest. Beyond the high wall a horse neighed. Two of the gypsies looked over their shoulders towards the sounds as if they were reading the cry of the horse. From the road came the silvery spray of a bicycle bell as someone sped down the hill. The crouching silence was broken by the clang of a bolt being drawn. The door in the wall crashed back, and two girls, spitting and fighting like angry cats, hurtled through and across the grass and into the ring. Oh my gosh, they were already fighting! Oh man. Crazy. We get a little cat fight and everything in this story, huh? Alright, chapter 18. Strong sensations. The head gypsy's voice cracked out. The girls separated reluctantly and stood facing him. The gypsy began to speak in a tone of harsh denunciation. Kareem put his hand up to his mouth and whispered behind it. Farfra is telling them that this is a great tribe of gypsies, and they have brought dissension among it. He says there is no room for hatred among themselves, only against those outside. The hatred they have created must be purged so that the tribe can live peacefully again. They are to fight. If the loser is not killed, she will be banished forever. That will be the same as death. These people wither and die outside the tribe. They cannot live in our world. It is like wild beasts forced to live in a cage. While Kareem spoke, Bond examined the two beautiful, taut, sullen animals in the center of the ring. They were both gypsy dark, with coarse black hair to their shoulders, and they were both dressed in the collection of rags you associate with with shantytown negroes, tattered brown shifts that were mostly darns and patches. One was bigger boned than the other, and obviously stronger, but she looked sullen and slow-eyed and might not be quick on her feet. She was handsome in a rather leonine way, and there was a slow red glare in her heavy-lidded eyes as she stood and listened impatiently to the head of the tribe. She ought to win. thought Bond. She is half an inch taller, and she is stronger. Where this girl Where this girl was a lioness, the other was a panther, lithe and quick, and with cunning sharp eyes that were not on the speaker, but sliding sideways, measuring inches, and the hands at her sides were curled into claws. The muscles of her fine legs looked hard as a man's. The breasts were small, and unlike the big breasts of the other girl, hardly swelled the rags of her shift. She looks a dangerous little bitch of a girl, thought Bond. She will certainly get in the first blow. She will be too quick for the other. At once he was proved wrong. As Varvara spoke his last word, the big girl who Karim whispered was called Zora, kicked hard sideways without taking aim, and caught the other girl square in the stomach, and as the smaller girl staggered, followed up with a swinging blow of the fist to the side of the head that knocked her sprawling on the stone floor. "Hoy de vida!" lamented a woman in the crowd. She needn't have worried. Even Bond could see that Vida was shamming as she lay on the ground, apparently winded. He could see her eyes glinting under her bent arm as Zora's foot came flashing at her ribs. Vida's hands flickered out together. They grasped the ankle, and her head struck into the instep like a snake's. Zora gave a scream of pain and wrenched furiously at her trapped foot. It was too late. The other girl was up on one knee and then standing erect, the foot still in her hands. She heaved upwards, and Zora's other foot left the ground and she crashed full length. The thud of the big girl's fall shook the ground. For a moment she lay still. With an animal snarl, Vida dived on top of her, clawing and tearing. My God, what a hellcat, thought Bond. Beside him, Kareem's breath hissed tensely through his teeth. But the big girl protected herself with her elbows and knees, and at last she managed to kick Vida off. She staggered to her feet and backed away, her lips bared from her teeth, and the shift hanging in tatters from her splendid body. At once she went in to the attack again. Her arms groped forward for a hold, and as the smaller girl leapt aside, Zora's hand caught the neck of her shift and split it down to the hem. But immediately Vida twisted in close under the reaching arms, and her fists and knees thudded into the attacker's body. This infighting was a mistake. The strong arms clamped shut round the smaller girl, trapping Vida's hands low down so that they could not reach up to Zora's eyes, and slowly Zora began to squeeze, while Vida's legs and knees thrashed ineffectively below. Oh my gosh. Bond thought that now the big girl must win. All Zora had to do was to fall on the other girl. Vida's head would crack down on the stone, and then Zora could do as she liked. But all of a sudden it was the big girl who began to scream. Bond saw that Vida's head was buried deep in the other's breast. Her teeth were at work. Zora's arms let go as she reached for Vida's hair to pull the head back and away from her. But now Vida's hands were free and they were scrabbling at the big girl's body. The girls tore apart and backed away like cats, their shining bodies glinting through the last rags of their shifts, and blood showing on the exposed breasts of the big girl. They circled wearily, both glad to have escaped, and as they circled, they tore off the last of their rags and threw them into the audience. Bond held his breath at the sight of the two glistening naked bodies, and he could feel Kareem's body tense beside him. The ring of gypsies seemed to have come closer to the two fighters. The moon shone on glittering eyes, and there was the whisper of hot, panting breath. Still, the two girls circled slowly, their teeth bared and their breath coming harshly. The light glinted off their heaving breasts and stomachs and off their hard, boyish flanks. Their feet left dark sweat marks on the white stones. Again, it was the big girl, Zora, who made the first move with a sudden forward leap, and arms held out like a wrestler's, but Vida stood her ground. Her right foot lashed out in a furious coup de savate that made a slap like a pistol shot. The big girl gave a wounded cry and clutched at herself. At once Vida's other foot kicked up to the stomach, and she threw herself in after it. Oh my gosh. Oh, I guess these girls really know how to fight, huh? There was a low growl from the crowd as Zora went down on her knees. Her hands went up to protect her face, but it was too late. The smaller girl was astride her, and her hands grasped Zora's wrists as she bore down on her with all her weight and bent her to the ground, her bared white teeth reaching towards the offered neck. Boom! The explosion cracked the tension like a nut. A flash of flame lit the darkness behind the dance floor, and a chunk of masonry sang past Bond's ear. Suddenly, the orchard was full of running men, and the head gypsy was slinking forward across the stone with his carved dagger held out in front of him. Kareem was going after him, a gun in his hand. As the gypsy passed the two girls, now standing wide-eyed and trembling, he shouted a word at them, and they took to their heels and disappeared among the trees where the last of the women and children were already vanishing among the shadows. Bond, the Beretta held uncertainly in his hand, followed slowly in the wake of Kareem towards the wide breach that had been blown out of the garden wall, and wondered what the hell was going on. The stretch of grass between the hole in the wall and the dance floor was a turmoil of fighting, running figures. It was only as Bond came up with the fight that he distinguished the squat, conveniently dressed burglars from the whirling finery of the gypsies. There seemed to be more of the faceless ones than of the gypsies, almost 2 to 1. As Bond peered into the struggling mass, a gypsy youth was ejected from it, clutching his stomach. He groped towards Bond, coughing terribly. 2 small dark men came after him, their knives held low. Instinctively, Bond stepped to one side so that the crowd was not behind the two men. He aimed at their legs above the knees, and the gun in his hand cracked twice. The two men fell soundlessly, face downwards in the grass. 2 bullets gone. Only 6 left. Bond edged closer to the fight. A knife hissed past his head and clanged on to the dance floor. It had been aimed at Kareem, who came running out of the shadows with 2 men on his heels. The second man stopped and raised his knife to throw, and Bond shot from the hip, blindly, and saw him fall. The other man turned and fled among the trees, and Kareem dropped to one knee beside Bond, wrestling with his gun. "Cover me!" he shouted. "Jammed on the first shot! It's those bloody burglars! God knows what they think they're doing!" A hand caught Bond round the mouth and yanked him backward. On his way to the ground he smelled carbolic soap and nicotine. He felt a boot thud into the back of his neck. As he whirled over sideways in the grass, he expected to feel the searing flame of a knife. But the men, and there were 3 of them, were after Kareem, and as Bond scrambled to one knee, he saw the squat black figures piled down on the crouching man, who gave one lash upwards with his useless gun, and then went down under them. At the same moment as Bond leaped forward and brought his gun butt on a round shaven head, something flashed past his eyes, and
The curved dagger of the head gypsy was growing out of a heaving back. Then Kareem was on his feet, and the third man was running, and a man was standing in the breach in the wall, shouting one word. Again and again, and one by one, the attackers broke off their fights and doubled over to the man and past him and out of the road.
"Shoot, James, shoot!" roared Kareem. "That's Kralumkin! He started—" Oh, he stopped talking. Sorry, my bad. He started to run forward. Bond's gun spat once, but the man had dodged round the wall, and 30 yards is too far for night shooting with an automatic. As Bond lowered his hot gun, there came the staccato fire of a squadron of Lambrettas, and Bond stood and listened to the swarm of wasps flying down the hill. There was silence, except for the groans of the wounded. Bond listlessly watched Kareem and Vavra come back through the breach in the wall and walk among the bodies, occasionally turning one over with a foot. The other gypsies seeped back from the road, and the older women came hurrying out of the shadows to attend to their men. Bond shook himself. What the hell had it all been about? 10 or a dozen men had been killed. What for? Whom had they been trying to get? Not him, Bond. When he was down and ready for the killing, they had passed him by and made for Kareem. This was the second attempt on Kareem's life. Was it anything to do with the Romanova business? How could it possibly tie in? Bond tensed. His gun spoke twice from the hip. The knife clattered harmlessly off Kareem's back. The figure that had risen from the dead twirled slowly round like a bullet dancer. Oh, bullet dancer, oh my god. Like a ballet dancer, and toppled forward on his face. Bond ran forward. He had been just in time. The moon had caught the blade, and he had had a clear field of fire. Kareem looked down at the twitching body. He turned to meet Bond. Bond stopped in his tracks. "You bloody fool," he said angrily. "Why the hell can't you take more care? You ought to have a nurse." Most of Bond's anger came from knowing that it was he who had brought a cloud of death around Kareem. Darko Kareem grinned shamefacedly. "Now is not good, James. You have saved my life too often. We might have been friends. Now the distance between us is too great. Forgive me, for I can never pay you back." He held out his hand. Bond brushed it aside. "Don't be a damn fool, Darko," he said roughly. "My gun worked. That's all. Yours didn't. You'd better get one that does. For Christ's sake, tell me what the hell this is all about. There's been too much blood splashing about tonight. I'm sick of it. I want to drink. Come and finish that Rocky." He took the big man's arm. As they reached the table, littered with the remains of the supper, a piercing, terrible scream came out of the depths of the orchard. Bond put his hand on his gun. Kareem shook his head. "We shall soon know what the faceless ones were after," he said gloomily. "My friends are finding out. I can guess what they'll discover. I think they will never forgive me for having been here tonight. 5 of their men are dead."
"There might have been a dead woman, too,"
said Bond, unsympathetically.
"At least you've saved her life. Don't be stupid, Darko. These gypsies knew the risks when they started spying for you against the burglars. It was gang warfare. He added a dash of water to 2 tumblers of raki. They both emptied the glasses at one swallow. The head gypsy came up, wiping the tip of his curved dagger on a handful of grass. He sat down and accepted a glass of raki from Bond. He seemed quite cheerful. Bond had the impression that the fight had been too short for him. The gypsy said something slyly. Kareem chuckled. He said that his judgment was right. You killed well. Now he wants you to take on those 2 women. Tell him even one of them would be too much for me. But tell him I think they are fine women. I would be glad if he would do me a favor and call the fight a draw. Enough of his people have been killed tonight. He will need these 2 girls to bear children for the tribe.
Kareem translated. The gypsy looked sourly at Bond and said a few bitter words.
He says that you should not have asked him such a difficult favor. He says that your heart is too soft for a good fighter. But he says he will do what you ask.
The gypsy ignored Bond's smile of thanks. He started talking to Kareem, who listened attentively, occasionally interrupting the flow with a question. Kue's name was often mentioned. Kareem talked back. There was deep contrition in his voice, and he refused to allow himself to be stopped by protests from the other. There came a last reference to Krillinku. Krillinku. Am I saying that right? Krillinku? Kareem turned to Bond.
My friend, he said drearily, it is a curious affair. It seems the burglars were ordered to kill Vavra and as many of his men as possible. That is a simple matter, as they knew the gypsy had been working for me. Perhaps rather drastic, but in killing the Russians have not much finesse. They like mass death. Vavra was the main target. I was another. The declaration of war against me personally I can understand, but it seems that you were not to be harmed. You were exactly described so that there should be no mistake. That is odd. Perhaps it was desired that there should be no diplomatic repercussions. Who can tell? The attack was well planned. They came to the top of the hill by a roundabout route and free-wheeled down so that we should hear nothing. This is a lonely place, and there is not a policeman for miles. I blame myself for having treated these people too lightly.
Kareem looked puzzled and unhappy. He seemed to make up his mind. He said, "But now it is midnight. The rules will be here. There remains a small piece of work to be done before we go home to bed, and it is time we left these people. They have much to do before it is light." There are many. Oh wait, is it still him talking? My bad. There are many bodies to go into the Bosphorus, and there is the wall to be repaired. By daylight there must be no trace of these troubles. Our friend wishes you very well. He says you must return and that Zora and Vida are yours until their breasts fall. Oh my god. Oh man. He refuses to blame me for what has happened. He says that I am to continue sending him burglars. 10 were killed tonight. He would like some more. And now we will shake him by the hand and go. This is all he asks of us. We are good friends, but we are Gajos, and I expect he does not want us to see his women weeping over their dead. Kareem stretched out his huge hand. Varvara took it, and held it and looked into Kareem's eyes. For a moment his own fierce eyes seemed to go opaque. Then the gypsy let the hand drop and turned to Bond. The hand was dry and rough and padded like the paw of a big animal. Again the eyes went opaque. He let go of Bond's hand. He spoke rapidly and urgently to Kareem and turned his back on them and walked away towards the trees. Nobody looked up from his work as Kareem and Bond climbed through the breach in the wall. The rolls stood glittering in the moonlight, a few yards down the road opposite the cafe entrance. A young man was sitting beside the chauffeur. Kareem gestured with his hand.
That is my tenth son. He is called Boris. I thought I might need him. I shall.
The youth turned and said,
Good morning, sir.
Bond recognized him as one of the clerks in the warehouse. He was as dark and lean as the head clerk, and his eyes were also blue. The car moved down the hill. Kareem spoke to the chauffeur in English.
Who's this? Who's talking? Is this the chauffeur? It was a small street off the Hippodrome Square. When we get there, we will proceed softly. I will tell you when to stop. Wait. Oh, I'm sorry. This is Kareem talking. It is a small street off the Hippodrome Square. When we get there, we will proceed softly. I will tell you when to stop. Have you got the uniforms and the equipment? Yes, Kareem Bey. All right. Make good speed. It is time we were all in bed.
Kareem sank back in his seat. He took out a cigarette. They sat and smoked. Bond gazed out at the drab sheets and reflected that sparse street lighting is the sure sign of a poor town. It was some time before Kareem spoke. Then he said, The gypsy said we both have the wings of death over us. He said that I am to beware of a son of the snows, and you must beware of a man who is owned by the moon. He laughed harshly. Ha! That is a sort of rigmarole they talk. But he says that Krelunki isn't either of these men. That is good. Why? Because I cannot sleep until I have killed that man. I do not know if what happened tonight will have any connection with you and your assignment. I do not care. For some reason, war has been declared on me. If I do not kill Krelunki at the third attempt, he will certainly kill me. So, we are now on our way to keep an appointment with him in Samara. Alright, chapter 19. And so, Bond got to see a little cat fight. He got to see a little action between two beautiful women, and then now they're promised to him because he saved them and saved some people, some gypsies. And yeah, and now he's dealing with all this mess. Plus now he has to go see some chick, and he's probably just like, what the hell? Why is this happening? Bond's got a lot on his plate, you know. And he's so like blasé about it. Alright, chapter 19. The Mouth of Marilyn Monroe. Oh. The car sped through the deserted streets, past shadowy mosques from which dazzling minarets lanced up towards the three-quarter moon, under the ruined aqueduct, and across the Ataturk Boulevard, and north of the barred entrances to the Grand Bazaar. At the column of Constantine the car turned right through mean, twisting streets that smelled of garbage, and finally debouched into a long ornamental square in which 3 stone columns fired themselves like a battery of space rockets into the spangled sky.
Slow,
said Kareem softly. They crept round the square under the shadow of the lime trees, down a street on the east side. The lighthouse below the Seraglio Palace gave them a great yellow wink.
stop.
The car pulled up in the darkness under the limes. Kareem reached for the door handle.
We shan't be too long, James. You sit up front in the driver's seat, and if a policeman comes along, just say, Ben be Karimian Ortagigium.
Can you remember that? It means I am Kareem Bier's partner. They'll leave you alone.
Bond snorted. Thanks very much. But you'll be surprised to hear I'm coming with you. You're bound to get into trouble without me. Anyway, I'm damned if I'm going to sit here trying to bluff policemen. The worst of learning one good phrase is that it sounds as if one knew the language. The policeman will come back with a barrage of Turkish, and when I can't answer, he'll smell a rat. Don't argue, Darko.
Well, don't blame me if you don't like this. Kareem's voice was embarrassed. It's going to be a straight killing in cold blood. In my country, you let sleeping dogs lie, but when they wake up in the bite, you shoot them.
You don't offer them a duel. All right? Whatever you say,
said Bond.
I've got one bullet left in case you missed. Come on, then,
said Kareem reluctantly. We've got quite a walk.
The other two will be going another way.
Kareem took a long walking stick from the chauffeur and a leather case. He slung them over his shoulder, and they started off down the street into the yellow wink of the lighthouse. Their footsteps echoed hollowly back at them from the iron-shuttered shop frontages. There was not a soul in sight, not a cat, and Bond was glad he was not walking alone down this long street towards the distant baleful eye. From the first, Istanbul had given him the impression of a town where, with the night, horror creeps out of the stones. It seemed to him a town the centuries had so drenched in blood and violence that when daylight went out the ghosts of its dead were its only population. His instinct told him, as it has told other travelers, that Istanbul was a town he would be glad to get out of alive. They came to a narrow, stinking alley that dived steeply down the hill to their right. Kareem turned into it and started gingerly down its cobbled surface.
"Watch your feet,"
he said softly.
"Garbage is a polite word for what my charming people throw into their streets."
The moon shone whitely down the moist river of cobbles. Bond kept his mouth shut and breathed through his nose. He put his feet down, one after the other, flat-footedly, and with his knees bent, as if he was walking down a snow slope. He thought of his bed in the hotel, and the comfortable cushions of the car under the sweetly smelling lime trees, and he wondered how many more kinds of dreadful stench he was going to run into during his present assignment.
Oh man, he really can't stand the smells out there in Istanbul.
They stopped at the bottom of the alley. Kareem turned to him with a broad, white grin. He pointed upwards at a towering block of black shadow.
Mosque of Sultanahmet. Famous Byzantine frescoes. Sorry, I haven't got the time to show you more of the beauties of my country.
Without waiting for Bond's reply, he cut off to the right and along a dusty boulevard, lined with cheap shops, that sloped down toward the distant glint that was the Sea of Marmara. For 10 minutes they walked in silence. Then Kareem slowed and beckoned Bond into the shadows.
This will be a simple operation, he said softly. Krylenko lives down there, beside the railway line.
He gestured vaguely towards a cluster of red and green lights at the end of the boulevard.
He hides in a shack behind the Beale hoarding. There is a front door to the shack, also a trap door to the street through the hoarding. He thinks no one knows of this. My two men will go in at the front door. He will slip out through the hoarding. Then I shoot him. All right?
If you say so.
They walked on down the boulevard, keeping close to the wall. After 10 minutes, they came in sight of the 20-foot high hoarding that formed a facing wall to the T intersection at the bottom of the street. The moon was behind the hoarding, and its face in the shadow. Now Kareem walked even more carefully, putting each foot softly in front of him. About 100 yards from the hoarding,
Oh, excuse me.
the shadows ended, and the moon blazed whitely down on the intersection. Kareem stopped in the last dark doorway and stationed Bond in front of him, up against his chest.
Now we must wait, he whispered.
Bond heard Kareem fiddling behind him. There came a soft plop on the lid of the leather case came off. A thin, heavy steel tube, about 2 feet long, with a bulge at each end, was pressed into Bond's hand.
Sniper scope, German model, whispered Kareem. Infrared lens. Sees in the dark. Have a look at that big film advertisement over there. That face. Just below the nose, you'll see the outline of a trap door. Indirect line down from the signal box.
Bond rested his forearm against the door jamb and raised the tube to his right hand. He focused it on the patch of black shadow opposite. Slowly, the black dissolved into gray. The outline of a huge woman's face in some lettering appeared. Now Bond could read the lettering. It said, Niagara.
Sorry, this is like in a different language.
Niagara, Marilyn Monroe v. Joseph Cotton. And underneath, the cartoon feature, Bonzo Footbolu. Bond inched the glass down the vast pile of Marilyn Monroe's hair, and the cliff of forehead, and down the 2 feet of nose to the cavernous nostrils. A faint square showed in the poster. It ran from below the nose into the great alluring curve of the lips. It was about 3 feet deep. From it there would be a longish drop to the ground. Behind Bond there sounded a series of soft clicks. Kareem held forward his walking stick. As Bond had supposed, it was a gun, a rifle with a skeleton butt, which was also a twist breech. The squat bulge of a silencer had taken the place of the rubber tip.
Barrel from the new .88 Winchester, whispered Kareem proudly. Put together for me by a man in Ankara. Takes the 308 cartridge, the short one, 3 of them. Give me the glass. I want to get that trapdoor lined up before my men go in at the front. Mind if I use your shoulder as a rest?
All right. Bond handed Kareem the sniper scope. Kareem clipped it to the top of the barrel and slid the gun along Bond's shoulder.
Got it, whispered Kareem. Vervarva said he's a good man, that.
He lowered his gun,
just as two policemen appeared at the right-hand corner of the intersection. Bond stiffened. "It's all right," Kareem said. "That's my boy and the chauffeur." He put two fingers in his mouth. A very quick, very low-pitched whistle sounded for a fraction of a second. One of the policemen lifted his hand to the back of his neck. The two policemen turned and walked away, their boots ringing loudly on the paving stones. "Few minutes more," whispered Kareem. "They've got to get round the back of that hoarding." Bond felt the heavy barrel of the gun slip into place along his right shoulder. The moon-struck silence was broken by a loud iron clang from the signal box behind the hoarding. One of the signal arms dropped. A green pinpoint of light showed among the cluster of reds. There was a soft, slow rumble in the distance, away to the left by Seraglio Point. It came closer, and sorted itself into the high pant of an engine and the grinding clangor of a string of badly coupled goods trucks. A faint yellow glimmer shone along the embankment to the left. The engine came laboring into view above the hoarding. The train slowly clanked by on its 100-mile journey to the Greek frontier, a broken black silhouette against the silver sea, and the heavy cloud of smoke from its cheap fuel drifted towards them on the still air. As the red light on the brake van glimmered briefly and disappeared, there came the deeper rumble as the engine entered a cutting, and then two harsh, mournful whoops as it whistled its approach to the little station of Buyuk, a mile further down the line. The rumble of the train died away. Bond felt the gun pressed deeper into his shoulder. He strained his eyes into the target of shadow. In the center of it, a deeper square of blackness showed. Bond cautiously lifted his left hand to shade his eyes from the moon. There came a hiss of breath from behind his right ear. "He's coming!" Out of the mouth of the huge shadowed poster, between the great violet lips, half open in ecstasy, the dark shape of a man emerged, and hung down like a worm from the mouth of a corpse. The man dropped. A ship going up towards the Bosphorus growled in the night like a sleepless animal in a zoo. Bond felt a prickle of sweat on his forehead. The barrel of the rifle depressed as the man stepped softly off the pavement towards them. When he's at the edge of the shadow, he'll start to run, thought Bond. You damn fool, get the sights further down. Now, the man bent for a quick sprint across the dazzling white street. He was coming out of the shadow. His right leg was bent forward, and his shoulder was twisted to give him momentum. At Bond's ear there was the clunk of an axe hitting into a tree trunk. The man dived forward, his arms outstretched. There was a sharp "tok" as his chin or his forehead hit the ground. An empty cartridge tinkled down at Bond's feet. He heard the click of the next round going into the chamber. The man's fingers scrabbled briefly at the cobbles. His shoes knocked on the road. Then he lay absolutely still. Kareem grunted. The rifle came down on Bond's shoulder. Bond listened to the noises of Kareem folding up the gun and putting away the sniper scope in its leather case. Bond looked away from the sprawling figure in the road, the figure of the man who had been, but was no more. He had a moment of resentment against the life that made him witness these things. The resentment was not against Kareem. Kareem had twice been this man's target. In a way, it had been a long duel in which the man had fired twice to Kareem's once, but Kareem was the cleverer, cooler man, and the luckier. And that had been that. But Bond had never killed in cold blood, and he hadn't liked watching and helping someone else do it. Kareem slightly took his arm. They walked slowly away from the scene and back to the way that they came. Kareem seemed to sense Bond's thoughts. "Life is full of death, my friend," he said, philosophically, "and sometimes one is made the instrument of death. I do not regret killing that man, nor would I regret killing any of those Russians we saw in that office today. They are hard people. With them, what you don't get from strength, you won't get from mercy. They are all the same, the Russians. I wish your government would realize it and be strong with them, just as occasional little lessons in matters that I have taught them tonight."
In politics, one doesn't often have the chance of being as quick and neat as you were tonight, Darko. And don't forget, it's only one of their satellites you've punished. One of the men they always find to do their dirty work. Mark you," said Bond. "I quite agree about the Russians. They simply don't understand the carrot. Only the stick has any effect. Basically, they're masochists. They love the knot. That's why they were so happy under Stalin. He gave it to them. I'm not sure how they're going to react to the scraps of carrot they're being fed by Khrushchev and Co. As for England, the trouble today is that carrots for all are the fashion, at home and abroad. We don't show teeth any more, only gums."
Kareem laughed harshly, but made no comment. They were climbing back up the stinking alley, and there was no breath for talk. Yeah, 'cause it stinks. They rested at the top and then walked slowly towards the trees of the Hippodrome Square. "So you forgive me for today?" It was odd to hear the longing for reassurance in the big man's usually boisterous voice.
"Forgive you? Forgive what? Don't be ridiculous."
There was affection in Bond's voice.
"You've got the job to do, and you're doing it. I've been very impressed. You've got a wonderful setup here. I'm the one who ought to apologize. I seem to have brought a great deal of trouble down on your head, and you've dealt with it. I've just tagged along behind, and I've got absolutely nowhere with my main job, and will be getting pretty impatient. Perhaps there'll be some sort of message at the hotel."
But when Kareem took Bond back to the hotel and went with him to the desk, there was nothing for Bond. Kareem clapped on his back.
"Don't worry, my friend,"
he said cheerfully.
"Hope makes a good breakfast. Eat plenty of it. I will send the car in the morning, and if nothing has happened I will think of some more little adventures to pass the time. Clean your gun and sleep on it. You both deserve a rest."
Bond climbed the few stairs and unlocked his door and locked and bolted it behind him. Moonlight filtered through the curtains. He walked across and turned on the pink shaded lights on the dressing table. He stripped off his clothes and went into the bathroom and stood for a few minutes under the shower. He thought how much more eventful Saturday the 14th had been than Friday the 13th. He cleaned his teeth and gargled with a sharp mouthwash to get rid of the taste of the day, and turned off the bathroom light and went back into the bedroom. Bond drew aside one curtain and opened wide the tall windows and stood, holding the curtains open and looking out across the great boomerang curve of water under the riding moon. The night breeze felt wonderfully cool on his naked body. He looked at his watch. It said 2 o'clock. Bond gave a shuddering yawn. He let the curtains drop back into place. He bent to switch off the lights on the dressing table. Suddenly he stiffened, and his heart missed a beat. There had been a nervous giggle from the shadows at the back of the room. A girl's voice said, "Poor Mr. Bond, you must be tired. Come to bed." Oh man, there's some crazy chick in Bond's room. Oh my gosh. Gotta get my water bottle for this next chapter. Alright. Chapter 20. Black on Pink. I don't know what to make of that name. Or that title, rather. Bond whirled round. He looked over to the bed, but his eyes were blind from gazing at the moon. He crossed the room and turned on the pink shaded light by the bed. There was a long body under the single sheet. Brown hair was spread out on the pillow. The tips of fingers showed, holding the sheet up over the face. Lower down the breast stood up like hills under snow. Bond laughed shortly. He leaned forward and gave the hair a soft tug. There was a squeak of protest from under the sheet. Bond sat down on the edge of the bed. After a moment's silence, a corner of the sheet was cautiously lowered, and one large blue eye inspected him. "You look very improper." The voice was muffled by the sheet. "What about you? And how did you get here?" "I've walked down 2 floors. I live here too." The voice was deep and provocative. Oh, her voice is deep, my bad. Gotta give her a deep voice. There was a very little accent. Oh. "Well, I'm going to bed." The sheet came quickly down to the chin and the girl pulled herself up on the pillows. She was blushing. "Oh no!" Oh, no, it's a deep voice. "Oh no, you mustn't." "But it's my bed. And anyway, you told me to." The face was incredibly beautiful. Bond examined it coolly. The blush deepened. "That was only a phrase to introduce myself." "Well, I'm very glad to meet you. My name's James Bond." Oh, it's Tatiana. I was giving her like this sweet voice in the first couple chapters, but I guess she has like a deep voice. "Mine's Tatiana Romanova." She sounded the second A of Tatiana and the first A of Romanova very long. Let's see, the second A, Tatiana, and Romanova. Okay, I think that's how we pronounce it. "My friends call me Tanya." There was a pause while they looked at each other. The girl with curiosity, and with what might have been relief. Bond with cool surmise. She was the first to break the silence. "You look just like your photographs." She blushed again. "But you must put something on. It upsets me." "You upset me just as much.
That's called sex. If I got into bed with you, it wouldn't matter. Anyway, what have you got on?
She pulled the sheet a fraction lower to show a quarter-inch black velvet ribbon round her neck. This. Bond looked down into the teasing blue eyes, now wide, as if asking if the ribbon was inadequate. He felt his body getting out of control. Damn you, Tanya. Where are the rest of your things? Or did you come down in the lift like that? Oh, no, that would not have been courtesy. They are under the bed.
Well, if you think you're going to get out of this room without...
Bond left the sentence unfinished. He got up from the bed and went to put on one of the dark blue silk pajama coats he wore instead of PJs.
Oh, pajamas. Sorry, I abbreviated the word.
What you are suggesting is not courtesy,
Oh, isn't it?
said Bond sarcastically. He came back to the bed and pulled up a chair beside it. He smiled down at her.
Well, I'll tell you something, Coulternier. You're one of the most beautiful women in the world.
The girl blushed again. She looked at him seriously. Are you speaking the truth? I think my mouth is too big. And am I as beautiful as Western girls? I was once told I look like Greta Garbo. Is that so?
More beautiful,
Said Bond.
there is more light in your face, and your mouth isn't too big. It's just the right size. For me, anyway.
What is that? A light in the face. What do you mean? Bond meant that she didn't look to him like a Russian spy. She seemed to show none of the reserve of a spy, none of the coldness, none of the calculation. She gave the impression of warmth of heart and gaiety. These things shone out through the eyes. He searched for a non-committal phrase.
There is a lot of gaiety and fun in your eyes,
He said lamely. Tatiana looked serious. That is curious, she said. There is not much fun and gaiety in Russia. No one speaks of these things. I have never been told that before.
Gaiety, she thought. After after the last 2 months? How could she be looking gay?
And yet, yes, there was a lightness in her heart. Was she a loose woman by nature? Or was it something to do with this man that she had never seen before? Relief about him after the agony of thinking about what she had to do? It was certainly much easier than she had expected. He made it easy, made it fun, with a spice of danger. He was terribly handsome, and he looked very clean. Would he forgive her when they got to London and she told him? Told him that she had been sent to seduce him, even the night on which she must do it, and the number of the room? Surely he wouldn't mind very much. It was doing him no harm. It was only a way for her to get to England and make those reports. Gaiety and fun in her eyes. Well, why not? It was possible. There was a wonderful sense of freedom being alone with a man like this, and knowing that she would not be punished for it. It was really terribly exciting. You are very handsome, she said. She searched for a comparison that would give him pleasure. You are like an American film star.
She was startled by his reaction. Oh, for God's sake, that's the worst insult you can pay a man. She hurried to make good her mistake. How curious that the compliment didn't please him. Didn't everyone in the West want to look like a film star? Ah, I was lying, she said. I wanted to give you pleasure. In fact, you are like my favorite hero. He's in a book by a Russian called Lermontov. I will tell you about him one day. One day? Bond thought it was time to get down to business. Now listen, Tanya. He tried not to look at the beautiful face on the pillow. He fixed his eyes on the point of her chin. We've got to stop fooling and be serious. What is all this about? Are you really going to come back to England with me? He raised his eyes to hers. It was fatal. She had opened them wide again in that damnable guilelessness. But of course! Oh! Bond was taken aback by the directness of her answer. He looked at her suspiciously. You're sure? Yes. Her eyes were truthful now. She had stopped flirting. You're not afraid? He saw a shadow cross her eyes. But it was not what he thought. She had remembered that she had a part to play. She was to be frightened of what she was doing. Terrified. It had sounded so easy, this acting, but now it was difficult. How odd! She decided to compromise. Oh, well, yes, I am afraid, but not so much now. You will protect me? I thought you would. Well, yes, of course I will. Bond thought of her relatives in Russia. He quickly put the thought out of his mind. What was he doing? Trying to dissuade her from coming? He closed his mind to the consequences he imagined for her. There's nothing to worry about. I'll look after you. And now, for the question he had been shirking. He felt a ridiculous embarrassment. The girl wasn't in the least what he had expected. It was spoiling everything to ask the question. It had to be done. What about the machine? Yes. It was as if he had cuffed her across the face. Oh, man. Cuffed. Pain shone in her eyes and the edge of tears. She pulled the sheet over her mouth and spoke from behind it. Her eyes above the sheet were cold. So that's what you want. Now listen. Bond put nonchalance in his voice. This machine's got nothing to do with you and me, but my people in London want it. He remembered security. He added blandly, it's not all that important. They know all about the machine and they think it's a wonderful Russian invention. They just want one to copy, like your people copy foreign cameras and things. God, how lame it sounded. And now you're lying. A big tear rolled out of one wide blue eye and down the soft cheek and on the pillow. She pulled the sheet up over her eyes. Bond reached out and put his hand on her arm under the sheet. The arm flinched away angrily. Damn the bloody machine, he said impatiently. But for God's sake, Tanya, you must know that I've got a job to do. Just say one way or the other and we'll forget about it. There are lots more things to talk about. We've got to arrange our journey and so on. Of course, my people want it, or they wouldn't have sent me out to bring you home with it. Tatiana dabbed her eyes with the sheet. Brusquely she pulled the sheet down to her shoulders again. She knew that she had been forgetting her job. It had just been that. Oh well. If only he had said the machine didn't matter to him so long as she would come. But that was too much to hope for. He was right. He had a job to do. So had she. She looked up at him calmly. I will bring it. Have no fear. But do not let us mention it again. And now listen. She sat up straighter on the pillows. We must go tonight. She remembered her lesson. It is the only chance. This evening I am on night duty from 6 o'clock. I shall be alone in the office, and I will take the spectre. Bond's eyes narrowed. His mind raced as he thought of the problems that would have to be faced. Where to hide her, how to get her out to the first plane after the loss had been discovered. It was going to be a risky business. They would stop at nothing to get her and the spectre back. Roadblock on the way to the airport, bomb in the plane, anything. That's wonderful, Tanya. Bond's voice was casual. We'll keep you hidden, and then we'll take the plane first tomorrow morning. Don't be foolish. Tatiana had been warned that here would be some difficult lines in her part. We will take the train, this Orient Express. It leaves at 9 tonight. Do you think I haven't been thinking this out? I won't stay a minute longer in Istanbul than I have to. We will be over the frontier at dawn. You must get the tickets and a passport. I will travel with you as your wife. She looked happily up at him. I shall like that. In one of those coupes I've read about. They must be very comfortable, like a tiny house on wheels. During the day we will talk and read, and at night you will stand in the corridor outside our house and guard it. Like hell I will, said Bond. But look here, Tanya. That's crazy. They're bound to catch up with us somewhere. It's 4 days and 4 nights. I'm sorry, 4 days and 5 nights to London on that train. We've got to think of something else. I won't, said the girl flatly. That's the only way I'll go. If you are clever, how could they find out? Oh, God, she thought. Why had they insisted on this train? But they had been definite. It was a good place for love, they had said. She would have 4 days to get him to love her. Then, when they got to London, life would be easy for her. He would protect her. Otherwise, if they flew to London, she would be put straight into prison. The 4 days were essential, and they had warned her. We will have men on the train to see you don't get off. So be careful and obey your orders. Oh, God. Oh, God. Yet now she longed for those 4 days with him in the little house on wheels. How curious it had been her duty to force him. Now it was her passionate desire. She watched Bond's thoughtful face. She longed to stretch out a hand to him and reassure him that it would be all right, that this was a harmless conspiratia to get her to England, that no harm could come to either of them because that was not the object of the plot. He's in the plot, guys. He's in the plot. Well, I still think it's crazy, said Bond, wondering what M's reaction would be. But I suppose it may work. I've got the passport. it will need a Yugoslav visa. He looked at her sternly. Don't think I'm going to take you on the part of the train that goes through Bulgaria, or I shall think you want to kidnap me.
I do, Tatiana giggled. That's exactly what I want to do.
Now shut up, Tanya. We've got to work this out. I'll get the tickets, and I'll have one of our men come along, just in case. He's a good man. You'll like him. Your name's Caroline Somerset. Don't forget it. How are you going to get to the train?
Caroline Somerset.
Hey, Brolito, what's up, Brolito?
Bond has finally met up with his girl, Tatiana Romanova. She's convincing him to travel by train back to England. It's gonna be a fun time on that train ride, if you know what I mean. The girl turned the name over in her mind. It's a pretty name. And you are Mr. Somerset? She laughed happily. That is fun. Do not worry about me. I will come to the train just before it leaves. It is the Circassy station. I know where it is, so that is all. And we do not worry any more. Yes?
Suppose you lose your nerve. Suppose they catch you.
Suddenly, Bond was worried at the girl's confidence. How could she be so certain? A sharp tingle of suspicion ran down his spine. Before I saw you, I was frightened. Now I am not. Tatiana tried to tell herself that this was the truth. Somehow, it nearly was. Now I shall not lose my nerve, as you call it, and they cannot catch me. I shall leave my things in the hotel and take my usual bag to the office. I cannot leave my fur coat behind. I love it too dearly. But today is Sunday, and that will be an excuse to come to the office in it. Tonight, at 8:30, I shall walk out and take a taxi to the station. And now you must stop looking so worried. Impulsively, because she had to, she stretched out a hand towards him. Say that you are pleased. Bond moved to the edge of the bed. He took her hand and looked down into her eyes. God, he thought, I hope it's all right. I hope this crazy plan will work. Is this wonderful girl a cheat? Is she true? Is she real? The eyes told him nothing except that the girl was happy, and that she wanted him to love her, and that she was surprised at what was happening to her. Tatiana's other hand came up and round his neck and pulled him fiercely down to her. At first the mouth trembled under his, and then, as passion took her, the mouth yielded into a kiss without end. Hey, Jonathan, greetings from Colombia. How you doing tonight, Jonathan? Greetings, greetings. Greetings from the States. I hope you're having a good one so far. Bond lifted his legs onto the bed, while his mouth went on kissing her. His hand went to her left breast and held it, feeling the peak hard with desire under his fingers. His hand strayed on down across her flat stomach. Her legs shifted languidly. She moaned softly and her mouth slid away from his. Below the closed eyes the long lashes quivered like hummingbirds' wings.
Hold on. Is this starting to get, like, spicy? What's happening here? Hold on. Okay, we're not gonna get into details in the book. Okay.
You're having a good one, Jonathan. That's good. Have you ever read any James Bond books?
This is my first full length one. I'm reading it without knowing what's happening in the book. So we're all reading it for the first time together. Bond reached up and took the edge of the sheet and pulled it right down and threw it off the end of the huge bed. She was wearing nothing but the black ribbon round her neck, and black silk stockings rolled above her knees. Her arms groped up for him. Above them, and unknown to both of them, behind the gold-framed false mirror on the wall over the bed, the two photographers from Smersh sat close together in the cramped cabinet d'oeuvre as, before them, so many friends of the proprietor had sat on a honeymoon night in the stateroom of the Crystal Palace. And the view-finders gazed coldly down on the passionate arabesques the two bodies formed, and broke and formed again, and the clockwork mechanism of the cinecameras whirred softly on and on as the breath rasped out of the open mouths of the two men and the sweat of excitement trickled down their bulging faces into their cheap collars. Oh, they're being watched. Oh, that's absolutely terrible. Oh no, Jonathan, don't worry about your English being bad. I I can only kind of speak another language, so it's okay. Yes, and I do like movies. Do you like movies? All right, so we're on to our final chapter of the night. Chapter 21, The Orient Express. That's so terrible. They're being watched through the ceiling mirror. Oh, that's horrible. Let's see. Do I like movies more than books? Um, I like movies a lot, and I feel that books uh they give a little bit more, It makes you work for it 'cause you have to use your imagination. It for me it's more just that I don't have the time that I wish I could give to books. That's why I do a reading stream once a week. Just, 'cause I want to make my mind work, you know? All right, let's see. Chapter 21, Orient Express. What about you, Jonathan? Do you like books or movies more? Let's see. The great trains are going out all over Europe, one by one. Ooh, excuse me. But still, 3 times a week. The Orient Express thunders superbly over the 1,400 miles of glittering steel track between Istanbul and Paris. Under the arc lights, the long chaste German locomotive panted quietly with the labored breath of a dragon dying of asthma. Each heavy breath seemed certain to be the last. Then came another. Wisps of steam rose from the couplings between the carriages and died quickly in the warm August air. The Orient Express was the only live train in the ugly, cheaply architectured borough that is Istanbul's main station. The trains on the other lines were engineless and unattended, waiting for tomorrow. Only track number 3 and its platform throbbed with the tragic poetry of departure. The heavy bronze cipher on the side of the dark blue coach said, uh, Compagnie Internationale des Wagons Lits et des Grands Express Européens. Above the cipher, fitted into metal slots, was a flat iron sign that announced, in black capitals on white, Orient Express, and underneath, in 3 lines, Istanbul, Thessaloniki, Beograd,
Venezia, Milan, Lausna, and Paris. Or Paris. Let's see. Jonathan said, movies and books. I think the same that you. Books let my imagination fly. Yeah. What books have you read recently? If any? I know, I understand it's hard to make time for books. James Bond gazed vaguely at one of the most romantic signs in the world. For the 10th time he looked at his watch. 8:51. His eyes went back to the sign. All the towns were spelled in the language of the country except Milan. Why not Milano? Bond looked out his handkerchief and wiped his face. Oh, looked. Bond took out his handkerchief and wiped his face. Where the hell was the girl? Had she been caught? Had she had second thoughts? Had he been too rough with her last night? Or rather, this morning? In the great bed? Let's see, Jonathan said, my name is Bond. Johanato Bond. Nice. Yeah, I'm trying to work on my British accent. I guess I'm better at a Russian accent than British. 8:55. The quiet pant of the engine had stopped. There came an echoing whoosh as the automatic safety valve let off the excess steam. Excuse me. 100 yards away, through the milling crowd, Bond watched the station master raise a hand to the engine driver and fireman and start walking slowly back to the train, banging the doors of the third-class carriages up front. Passengers, mostly peasants going back into Greece after a weekend with their relatives in Turkey, hung out of the windows and jabbered at the grinning crowd below. Beyond, where the faded arc lights stopped and the dark blue night and the stars showed through the crescent mouth of the station, Bond saw a red pinpoint turn to green. The station master came nearer. Let's see. Jonathan said, are you Russian too? I am not Russian. I am not Russian, but I was told my Russian accent's pretty good, you know. I'm American. That's what I am. So let's see. The station master came nearer. The brown uniformed wagon attendant tapped Bond on the arm. En voiture, s'il vous plaît? The two rich-looking Turks kissed their mistresses. They were too pretty to be wives, and, with a barrage of laughing injunctions, stepped on to the little iron pedestal and up the two tall steps into the carriage. There were no other wagon-lit travelers on the platform. The conductor, with an impatient glance at the tall Englishman, picked up the iron pedestal and climbed with it into the train. The station master strode purposefully by two more compartments, the first and second class carriages, and then, when he reached the guard's van, he would lift the dirty green flag. There was no hurrying figure coming up the platform from the Gauchet. I don't know what that is. It's like, I don't know what language that word is. Gauchet? Yeesh. Let's see. Jehonathan said, what part of the US are you from? I'm like in the middle of the US. I am in the middle. Oh my gosh, I just dropped my book. Ugh. Alright, hold on. Now I gotta. Yeah, I dropped my book. I gotta find where I left off. Give me a sec. Yeah, I don't really talk about where I'm from. I'm from the middle. And the best state. Not directly in the middle, like not literally directly in the middle of the US, but around that area. Okay, where am I? Uh, okay, all right, I found my spot. Okay. High up above the Gauchet, near the ceiling of the station, the minute hand of the big illuminated clock jumped forward an inch and said 9. A window banged down above Bond's head. Bond looked up. His immediate reaction was that the black veil was too wide meshed. The intention to disguise the luxurious mouth and the exquisite blue eyes was amateurish. Quick. The train had begun to move. Bond reached for the passing handrail and swung up to the step. The attendant was still holding open the door. Bond stepped unhurriedly through.
Madame was late, said the attendant. She came along the corridor. She must have entered by the last carriage.
Bond went down the carpeted corridor to the center coupe. A black 7 stood above a black 8 on the white metal lozenge. The door was ajar. Bond walked in and shut it behind him. The girl had taken off her veil and her black straw hat. She was sitting in the corner by the window. A long, sleek sable coat was thrown open to show a natural colored shantung dress with a pleated skirt, honey colored nylons, and a black crocodile belt and shoes. She looked composed. "You have no faith, James." Bond sat down beside her.
Tanya, he said, if there was a bit more room, I'd put you across my knee and spunk you. You nearly gave me a heart failure. What happened?
"Nothing," said Tatiana innocently. "What could happen? I said I would be here, and I am. You have no faith, since I am sure you are more interested in my dowry than in me. It is up there." Bond looked casually up. The two small cases were on the rack beside his suitcase. He took her hand. He said, "Thank God you're safe." Something in his eyes, perhaps the flash of guilt, as he admitted to himself that he had been more interested in the girl than the machine, reassured her. She kept his hand in hers and sank contentedly back in her corner. Let's see. Jonathan asks, have you ever been in the middle? I think I've probably flown through the middle. But that's about it. Let's see. The train screeched slowly round Seraglio Point. The lighthouse lit up the roofs of the dreary shacks along the railway line. With his free hand, Bond took out a cigarette and lit it. He reflected that they would soon be passing the back of the great billboard where Krelunku had lived, until less than 24 hours ago. Bond saw again the scene in every detail. The white crossroads, the two men in the shadows, the doomed man slipping out through the purple lips. Oh, Jonathan. Okay, Madam Tatiana. Oh, hey, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. I'm glad you're having a good time with the stream over here. Hopefully, I'm
reading it clearly enough because you said that your English isn't too good, but hopefully it's, I'm reading clearly enough that you can understand it. Let's see. The girl watched his face with tenderness. What was this man thinking? What was going on behind those cold, level, gray blue eyes that sometimes turned soft and sometimes, as they had done last night before his passion had burned out in her arms, blazed like diamonds? Now they were veiled in thoughts. Was he worrying about them both? Worrying about their safety? If only she could tell him that there was nothing to fear, that he was only her passport to England. Him and the heavy case the resident director had given her that evening in the office. The director had said the same thing. Oh, excuse me. Here, here is your passports to England, Corporal, he had said cheerfully. Look! He had unzipped the bag. A brand new spectre. Be certain not to open the bag again or let it out of your compartment until you get to the other end, or this Englishman will take it away from you and throw you on the dust heap. It is this machine they want. Do not let them take it from you, or you will have failed your duty. Understood? A signal box loomed up in the blue dusk outside the window. Tatiana watched Bond get up and pull down the window and crane out into the darkness. His body was close to her. She moved her knees so that it touched him. How extraordinary! This passionate tenderness that had filled her ever since she had seen him last night standing naked at the window, his arms up to hold the curtains back, his profile under the tousled black hair, intent and pale in the moonlight. And then the extraordinary fusing of their eyes and their bodies, the flame that had suddenly lit between them, between the two secret agents, thrown together from enemy camps a whole world apart, each involved in his plot against the country of the other, antagonists by profession, yet turned, and by the orders of their governments, into lovers. Tatiana stretched out a hand and caught hold of the edge of the coat and tugged at it. Hey, Holy, what's up? Oh, yes, the Bond man has officially met up with Tatiana Romanova, and he is taking her back to England via a train. It's going to be a 4 day, what is it? It was a 4 nights, 5 days train ride? Something like that. What's up? Yeah, so they're going to get to know each other again and again and again and again on the train. Holy, sounds romantic. Oh, yes, you don't even know the half of it. Have you been doing, Holy? Let's see. Bond pulled up the window and turned. He smiled down at her. He read her eyes. He bent and put his hands on the fur over her breast and kissed her hard on the lips. Tatiana leant back, dragging him with her. There came a soft double knock on the door. Bond stood up. He pulled out his handkerchief and briskly scrubbed the rouge off his lips. That's my friend, Karim. Oh, excuse me. She Holly said, I have been back to work 3 weeks, still getting used to it. Oh, yeah, how's work feeling? How's it going, and how are you feeling from the work? Let's see. That'll be my friend, Karim, he said. I must talk to him. I will tell the conductor to make up the beds. Stay here while he does it. I won't be long. I shall be outside the door."
He leant forward and touched her hand, and looked at her wide eyes and at her rueful, half-open lips. Let's see. Okay, yeah, this is him.
"We shall have all the night to ourselves. First, I must see that you are safe."
He unlocked the door and slipped out. Let's see, Holly said it's actually improving my pain by building up the legs and stuff. Hey, that's good.
Yeah, usually when we have pain, it's because we're just weak. We're weak bodies and we need to make them stronger, you know? But that's good. I'm happy to hear that your body is doing well. Let's see, you're getting a lawyer tomorrow to make sure I don't get deceived by insurance company. Oh, yeah. How's that turning out for you? I forgot your, it's like you're doing something with workman's comp, right? From that other job that you had. Still have back flare some. Are you taking medication for that? I mean, if you don't mind me asking. You don't have to tell me. It's fine. Let's see. Darko Karim's huge bulk was blocking the corridor. He was leaning on the brass guardrail, smoking, and gazing moodily out towards the Sea of Marmara that receded as the long train snaked away from the coast and turned inland and northwards. Bond leaned on the rail beside him. Karim looked into the reflection of Bond's face in the dark window. He said softly, "The news is not good. There are 3 of them on the train." "Oh!" An electric tingle ran up Bond's spine. "It's the 3 strangers we saw in that room. Obviously they're on to you and the girl." Karim glanced sharply sideways. That makes her a double, or doesn't it?" Bond's mind was cool. So the girl had been Bates, and yet, no, damn it. She couldn't be acting. It wasn't possible. The cipher machine? Perhaps, after all, it wasn't in that bag. Wait, hold on. Oh, wait a minute, he said. He turned and knocked softly on the door. He heard her unlock it and slip the chain. He went in and shut the door. She looked surprised. She had thought it was the conductor come to make up the beds. She smiled radiantly. "You have finished?" "Sit down, Tatiana. I've got to talk to you." Now she saw the coldness in his face, and her smile went out. She sat down obediently with her hands in her lap. Let's see, Holly said, "I actually went back to the same job, no meds. Their doctors say I have no permanent impairment. My doctor disagrees, so the company is trying to give me a small settlement due to the disagreement. Whole thing is confusing. Anywho, yeah, I don't know, man. All that health mix when it comes to like health and like legal stuff and like putting those 2 things together, it's like a huge can of worms. Like you just there's so much back and forth and so much of like he said, she said type stuff that yeah, it's gonna be a hot mess. But I'm glad that everything seems to be working out so far. You know, you got the job, you're feeling good, you got the, what is it? You said you're getting some meds. Where is it? Yeah, no meds. Yeah, just go to a masseuse or something, get a massage, you know? Do some deadlifts, make that back super strong. Let's see, so at this point, I'm going to just make sure everything's okay. Yeah, just, ice your back or warm it up, whichever one helps it out. let's see. Let's see what Bond is gonna say to Tatiana. Bond stood over her. Was there guilt in her face or fear? No, only surprise and a coolness to match his own expression. Now listen, Tatiana. Bond's voice was deadly. Something's come up. I must look into that bag and see if the machine is there. She said indifferently, Take it down and look. She examined the hands in her lap. So now it was going to come, what the director had said. They were going to take the machine and throw her aside. Perhaps have her put off the train. Oh God, this man was going to do that to her. Bond reached up and hauled down the heavy case and put it on the seat. He tore the zip sideways and looked in. Yes, a gray japanned metal case with 3 rows of squat keys, rather like a typewriter. He held the bag open towards her. Is that the Spectre? She glanced casually into the gaping bag. Yes. Bond zipped the bag shut and put it back on the rack. He sat down beside the girl. There are 3 MGB men on the train. We know they are the ones who arrived at your center on Monday. What are they doing here, Tatiana? Bond's voice was soft. He watched her, searched her with all his senses. She looked up. There were tears in her eyes. Were they the tears of a child found out? But there was no trace of guilt in her face. She only looked terrified of something. She reached out a hand and then drew it back. You aren't going to throw me off the train now that you've got the machine? Of course not, Bond said impatiently. Don't be idiotic. But we must know what these men are doing. What's it all about? Did you know they were going to be on the train? He tried to read some clues in her expression. He could only see a great relief. What else? A look of calculation? Of reserve? Yes, she was hiding something. But what? Let's see. Holly said, I swim to stretch legs and back. Some other stuff. Hey, that's good. That's good. That's like the best thing to do is swimming. That exercises your whole body easily. In an easy fashion. Tatiana seemed to make up her mind. Briskly, she wiped the back of her hand across her eyes. She reached forward and put the hand on his knee. The streak of tears showed on the back of her hand. She looked into Bond's eyes, forcing him to believe her. Oh, excuse me. James, she said, I did not know these men were on the train. I was told they were leaving today. For Germany. I assumed they would fly. That is all I can tell you. Until we arrive in England out of reach of my people, you must not ask me more. I have done what I said I would. I am here with the machine. Have faith in me. Do not be afraid for us. I am certain these men do not mean us harm. Absolutely certain. Have faith. Was she so certain? Wondered Tatiana. Had the club woman told her all the truth? But she also must have faith. Faith in the orders she had been given. These men must be the guards to see that she didn't get off the train. They could mean no harm. Later, they got to London. This man would hide her away out of reach of Smersh, and she would tell him everything he wanted to know. She had already decided this in the back of her mind, but
God knew what would happen if she betrayed them now. They would somehow get to her and him. She knew it. There were no secrets from these people, and they would have no mercy. So long as she played out her role, all would be well. Tatiana watched Bond's face for a sign that he believed her. Bond shrugged his shoulders. He stood up. I don't know what to think, Tatiana, he said. You are keeping something from me, but I think it's something you don't know is important, and I believe you think we are safe. We may be. It may be coincidence that these men are on the train. I must talk to Karim and decide what to do. Don't worry. We will look after you. But now we must be careful.
Let's see, Holy said, Bond believes she believes. He believes that she believes the lie. Oh, man. It seems like they kind of already have a little thing for each other, you know? They hooked up the first night, but that's to be expected, you know? Both trying to seal the deal, so to speak.
Bond looked round the compartment. He tried the communicating door with the next coupe. It was locked. He decided to wedge it open when the conductor had gone. He would do the same for the door into the passage, and he would have to stay awake. So much for the honeymoon on wheels. Bond smiled grimly to himself and rang for the conductor. Tatiana was looking anxiously up at him. "Don't worry, Tatiana," he said again. "Don't worry about anything. Go to bed when the man has gone. Don't open the door unless you know it's me. I will sit up tonight and watch. Perhaps tomorrow it will be easier. I will make a plan with Karim. He is a good man."
See, Holy, that's how Bond rolls, I guess. Yeah, right. He's taking one for the team with this girl, you know? He has to show her a good time.
The conductor knocked. Bond let him in and went out into the corridor. Karim was still there gazing out. The train had picked up speed and was hurtling through the night, its harsh, melancholy whistle echoing back at them from the walls of a deep cutting against the sides of which the lighted carriage windows flickered and danced. Karim didn't move, but his eyes in the mirror of the window were watchful. Bond told him of the conversation. It was not easy to explain to Karim why he trusted the girl as he did. He watched the mouth of the window curl ironically as he tried to describe what he had read in her eyes and what his intuition told him. Karim sighed res- resignedly. "James," he said, "you are now in charge. This is your part of the operation. We have already argued most of this out today. Yeah, the danger of the train, the possibility of getting the machine home in the diplomatic bag, the integrity or otherwise of this girl. It certainly appears that she has surrendered unconditionally to you. At the same time, you admit that you have surrendered to her. Perhaps only partially, but you have decided to trust her. In this morning telephone talk with M, he said that he would back your decision. He left it to you. So be it. But he didn't know we were to have an escort of 3 MGB men. Nor did we. And I think that would have changed all our views, yes?" "Yes." "Then the only thing to do is eliminate these 3 men, get them off the train. God knows what they are here for. I don't believe in coincidences any more than you, but one thing is certain.
We are not going to share the train with these men, right? Of course. Then leave it to me, at least for tonight. This is still my country, and I have certain powers in it, and plenty of money. I cannot afford to kill them. The train would be delayed. You and the girl might get involved, but I shall arrange something. Two of them have sleeping berths. The senior man with the mustache and the little pipe is next door to you, here in number 6.
He gestured backwards with his head. He is traveling on a German passport under the name of Melchior Benz, salesman. The dark one, the Armenian, is number 12. Oh, sorry, this is still him talking. Oh, no, it's not. My bad. The dark one, the Armenian, is number 12. He, too, has a German passport.
Kurt Goldberg, construction engineer.
They have through tickets to Paris.
Wait,
Where are the quotes? He's supposed to be talking right now, but there's no quotes on this. That's weird. Yeah, holy, they surrendered to each other, lol. Oh, so the machine, it's a cipher. Uh, it's called the Spectre. It 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 like codes their messages, and she offered the machine to, you know, pretty much England as a means to be removed from Russia and then moved to England because she fell in love with James Bond from watching him and like reading all the documents and stories and stuff that he's done in his missions and whatever. Yes. Yeah, but there's like a typo here. They're missing some quotation marks. Okay. Kurt Goldfarb, construction engineer. They have through tickets to Paris. I have seen their documents. I have a police card. The conductor made no trouble. He has all the tickets and passports in his cabin. The third man, the man with a boil on the back of his neck, turns also to have boils on his face. A stupid, ugly-looking brute. I have not seen his passport. He is traveling sitting up in the first class, in the next compartment next to me. He does not have to surrender his passport until the frontier, but he has surrendered his ticket. Like a oh, like a conjurer, Kareem flicked a yellow first-class ticket out of his coat pocket. He slipped it back. He grinned proudly at Bond. How the hell? Kareem chuckled. Before he settled down for the night, this dumb ox went to the lavatory. I was standing in the corridor, and I suddenly remembered how we used to steal rides on the train when I was a boy. I gave him a minute, and then I walked up and rattled the lavatory door. I hung on to the handle very tight. "Ticket collector," I said in a loud voice. "Tickets, please." I said it in French, and again in German. There was a mumble from inside. I felt him try to open the door. I hung on so tight that he would think the door had stuck. "Do not derange yourself, monsieur," I said politely. "Push the ticket under the door." There was more fiddling with the door handle, and I could hear heavy breathing. Then there was a pause and a rustle under the door. There was the ticket. I said, "Merci, monsieur," very politely. I picked up the ticket and stepped across the coping into the next carriage. Kareem airily waved a hand. "The stupid oaf will be sleeping peacefully by now. He will think that his ticket will be given back to him at the frontier. He is mistaken. The ticket will be in ashes, and the ashes will be on the four winds." Kareem gestured towards the darkness outside. "I will see that this man is put off the train, however much money he has got."
He will be told that the circumstances must be investigated. His statements corroborated with the ticket agency. He will be allowed to proceed on a later train. Holy free ticket, nice. Bond smiled at the picture of Kareem playing his private school trick. You're a card, Darko. What about the other two? Darko Kareem shrugged his massive shoulders. Something will occur to me, he said confidently. The way to catch Russians is to make them look foolish, embarrass them, laugh at them. They can't stand it. We will somehow make these men sweat. Then we will leave it to MGB to punish them for failing in their duty. Doubtless they will be shot by their own people. Jeez, that's what a demotion. While they were talking, the conductor came out of number 7. Kareem turned to Bond and put a hand on his shoulder. Have no fear, James, he said cheerfully. We will defeat these people. Go to your girl. We will meet again in the morning. We shall not sleep much tonight, but that cannot be helped. Every day is different. Perhaps we shall sleep tomorrow. Bond watched the big man move off easily down the swaying corridor. He noticed that, despite the movement of the train, Kareem's shoulders never touched the walls of the corridor. Bond felt a wave of affection for the tough, cheerful, professional spy. Kareem disappeared into the conductor's cabin. Bond turned and knocked softly on the door of number 7. All right. And that brings us to the end of chapter 21. We have, let's see, how many more chapters left? We have 4 more. Yes, 4 more chapters. Not too bad. I might be able to finish this next week. Maybe. It's still kind of a lot. I'll muscle through it. I'll muscle through it for all of you. But now, I wonder how smoothly their train ride is gonna go. And poor Tatiana, she's gonna be there all by herself. I guess I kinda half expected her to, like, fall in love with James Bond. But I guess it's more like she's falling in love with the freedom that it seems that this mission is giving her, as opposed to just like James. But I guess time will tell what happens with this one. Let's see. Brolita all late with some random question. What is it saying? Weird question time. You ever get really pissed off for coming in second place in something? Or is it just me being too hard on myself? Uh, it's like how I always say, coming in second means you're the first to lose. No, but yeah, no, that does bother me. It bothers me, and I try not to be bothered because it's like, oh, but you did so well. Like, you were pretty close. But then it turns into like, yeah, I was so close and I still sucked and I lost, man. Berlina, oh god damn it. No, that's me being too hard on myself. I was the first to lose. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I can relate with that one, Berlita. Don't worry. But I'm gonna go ahead and end it here. I don't know what time it is. It looks like it's kind of late. Oh, it's not that late. It's like the usual time that I finish up. Alright, Berlita. But don't be too hard on yourself, you know? Don't be too hard on yourself. I'm sure everything will be fine. But yes,
have a good night or a good day, depending on where you're at. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Go ahead and consider giving me a follow either here on Kick or YouTube. I'm trying to grow a little bit more. Amberlita said, too late. I'm too pissed to go to sleep. Oh my god. And I've got to get up early. Bro, I got to get up early too. I've been slacking on my running lately, and it's been kind of killing me uh, at the gym when I'm training. Like, I swear. I feel like I can't breathe. But then I look around and some of the other people are they're a little tired. And I'm like, okay, at least I don't suck too bad. But yeah, you gotta let me know what game you were playing. You were playing a game? Or was it like a competition? What were you doing? Now I gotta wait for him to respond. Yeah, type faster. I'm just kidding. I type slowly. Sunset Riders SNES. Ah, yes. A game that I know nothing about. That's like on Uncharted. They have a speed run tracker for Uncharted. You can actually click on it when you start a new game, the continuous speed run. And I was really tempted to click on it only because I know that you do like speed runs of games and stuff. But then I was like, you know what? I haven't played this game in so long. I have no idea where anything is. And I'm looking still for treasure. So I was like, I don't want to make myself feel bad taking a long time playing the game. Oh man. Let's see, Berlita said I came in second this week and I'm fucking infuriated and I can't explain why. Excuse me. I'm aware it's the nature of the competition and all that, but damn. I guess it's just one of those things where it's like you should be at this certain like skill level and you just didn't perform right, and then that's what kills you inside. At least that's how it is for me. It's like when I play bad in games, I get so mad. Or even like other stuff. When I just perform badly, I'm like, wow. Oh, why do I suck right now, man? Let's see. I've been in first place the previous 2 weeks, and by a large margin. Ah, it's okay. Maybe they're cheating. Maybe they're just dirty cheaters? I'm just kidding. Just take a break. Sometimes you gotta rest. You gotta rest the mind, rest the body, rest the gaming hands. Let's see. All right, Berlita. Well, have a good night. Try to take it easy. I'm sure you'll get there again. But I will see everyone else later. Don't forget to follow. I would appreciate it. And have a good night. Bye. Oh yeah, and I will be back on Tuesday. Not quite sure what I'll be playing. Um, but we'll figure it out. If you get in the Discord, I will put it up there. Bye. Good night.